So you're sick of getting absolutely dominated by your training partners in jiu-jitsu and you decide that studying is going to be your key to success. Except you go on BJJ Fanatics, buy a John Danaher video, and then fall asleep within the first 10 minutes because you have no idea how to study the sport. Instead of doing that, today I'm going to show you the exact study system that I've been using for myself and my students to produce results like these. So you don't have to waste hours of trying to cram information into your head that you're just going to forget anyway. So to start, the biggest mistake that most people make when they start studying jiu-jitsu is that they start very motivated, right? And this is you over here. Short little legs, short little arms. And you've got aspirations of becoming the best that you can be, right? This is the biggest mistake that most people make when they first start studying the sport of jiu-jitsu. They start off very well-intentioned, they start very motivated, and they have high aspirations of becoming the best that they can be. And because you start very motivated with very high ambition, the mistake and the trap that you fall into every single time is trying to digest as much information as humanly possible all at once. So you go to BJJ Fanatics, you go and get your laptop out, and you sit in front of it and you immediately fall asleep because you're trying to put too much information into your head at once. And because you're well-intentioned, you have high ambitions, what ends up happening is that you try and use the fire hose approach. And I'm sure you guys are aware of this. You've probably tried to do it already. You drink from the fire hose as much as humanly possible. You try and cram as much information in your head. But what you end up realizing is that you don't retain a single thing. And so when you go into your session after your study, that you've spent 2 or maybe 3 hours on, you get very disheartened quite quickly because you don't remember a single thing. Or even if you do remember it, you don't have an action plan of how to put it into your session. And so you end up wasting your time completely. And worse is that you actually get rather disheartened and unmotivated because you think that studying doesn't work, which is incorrect. So the way that we're going to change how you study today is going to be a 4-step process. It's very simple, it's very easy, it makes studying quite enjoyable, and it's actually the primary method that I use in my community to make sure my students retain as much information as possible and also get the best results possible. Because if you can't retain and then apply the information, you're completely wasting your time. So, step number 1, bodgy that. We are going to make some very poor artistic choices throughout this series, and you're going to laugh at me, and it's going to be very funny because I'm kind of retarded when it comes to art, but some of the pictures are going to be okay. But anyway. So step number 1 is you're going to find an instructional. So find the instructional that you should be watching is the techniques or the collection of techniques or the topic of information that you currently need the most. No, if you're a white or a blue belt, it is not a submission series. You do not need to be diving into the intricacies of Woj locks, or Mateusz Szynski likes to finish his ankle locks because you haven't mastered the fundamentals of half guard, guard passing, guard playing. You have no idea how to hand fight so that when you're on the feet, you get immediately taken down every single time. There are things that you have to put before that, and this is where you have to be really honest with yourself, because if you're not, even with this foolproof study system that I'm about to show you, you will be running in the wrong direction. And it doesn't matter how well you drive in the wrong direction, you're not going to get to your destination if you're driving the wrong way. So step number 1, find an instructional that actually suits your current needs. Most of the time, it's going to be positional based stuff. Then what you're going to do is you're going to watch the first 5 to 10 minutes. Now, why do I say 5 to 10 minutes? I say 5 to 10 minutes because your TikTok brain cannot accept any information overload past this time range. You've spent years of your life scrolling and doomying. We call it doomying at our gym. And 3 to 5 seconds is the typical range of attention span that most people actually have these days. And so if you have a big problem with attention, I recommend you start at 5 minutes. If your attention span's not too cooked and you're a little bit older, probably older than the age of 25, 10 minutes should suffice. But this time range does a couple of things. It narrows the window of focus that you're going to have to spend when you're learning the information, which gives you a higher chance of actually retaining it. And it also It also allows you to take the pressure off yourself because you're not trying to remember 80 different details from one position. You might pick up 3 to 5 things out of this 5 to 10 minutes, and that leads me into the next step of step 1. Take notes of the most important. Why do I say take notes? Taking notes is actually scientifically proven to ingrain the information deeper into your mind. And you'll start to realize why we are being forced to use nightmare rectangles and laptops and all these other things is because we're not able to register the information as well as taking physical notes, where your brain has to filter the information out, and it's in a very engaged process where you're forced to be able to consolidate the information, actually put it together in your brain. And it's also, I'm speaking kind of out of turn here because I don't know the research specifically, but it's something to do with the neurons that fire when your brain and your body are connected that allows you to learn a lot deeper, rather than just setting and forgetting and then not being able to use the information. So you're going to find the instructional of the piece of information that you're going to find the instructional of the technique or the position that you need, not that you want, because sometimes you have to eat your vegetables before you eat your steak or your donut. You're going to take 5 to 10 minutes of that initial, you're going to take the initial 5 to 10 minutes of that instructional and you're going to watch it all the way through. Then you're going to take notes of the most important things that you think could immediately be plugged into your game. And then you're going to take that to training, which is part of the next step of the process. Step 2 solves the single biggest issue with all of studying in jiu-jitsu that everybody forgets to do. And that's actually applying the information, but with a twist. That is a horrible fucking sentence. And my England is absolutely shite at the moment because I'm terribly ill, but I'm still making videos so you motherfuckers can get better at jiu-jitsu. You need to take the information that you learn in step 1 on board into your brain as close to your jiu-jitsu session as possible. Because if you don't, you're going to risk having a study time over breakfast where you're drinking Starbucks, eating your little croissant, watching some John Danaher, watching some Gordon Ryan, or whatever the fuck you're going to be watching. By the time you drive to work, get absolutely hounded by your HR manager because you've tried Diashi Hirais in the office and they deem that as unsafe for work. You've got a mountain of emails, a mountain of tasks, a mountain of bullshit. Your missus is texting you about all this shit you don't care about. She's trying to organize dinner and she's coming up with no ideas, which means you have to do it. You put all that shit in the way of you studying and then applying the information of jiu-jitsu, and good luck remembering a single fucking technique. It's just not going to happen. So you have to make sure it's as close as humanly possible, preferably 5 to 10 minutes, which everybody has, in the car before training. Tip of the day. What most people don't recognize, you're likely going to fail at applying the information. And that doesn't mean that studying doesn't work. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you're a bad learner. Dispel with all of that. That's all ridiculous. It just means that you tried something that's brand new, that you've never done before, and you expected it to work on the first try, which is completely ridiculous. Because when you're learning to walk, they stand up and then they fall back on their butt. And nobody in the room that sees that says, little Timmy, walking's not for him. We're just going to let him crawl on the ground forever and we're not going to push him. That's complete nonsense. Everybody gets around and encourages them to go again. And then finally they take 1 step and then they fall back over. And then they take 2 steps and they fall back over. And it's a gradual process. So what you have to do is get used to the fact that you're going to be likely failing in your first couple of attempts of applying this information. But the next step is the reason you're going to pass through that quite quickly instead of staying in this zone. Next step, number 3. When you likely fail, you're going to re-watch first 5 to 10 minutes. You're going to go over your notes that you previously took, and you're going to fill in the gaps of what you missed. It's like watching a movie for the first time and then watching it for the second time and realizing all the stuff that you missed that was so glaringly obvious. I remember the first time that I watched Fight Club, I went through that movie and just did not pick up on anything at all. I had no idea Brad Pitt was fake. I didn't know he was a figment of old mate's imagination. I thought all the fights were real. I thought the scene when he's driving the car and he's forcing him to say what he's living for, and then he's going to turn into the truck and what have you. You don't pick up on any of that until you watch it the second time through, when you recognize the big reveal at the end. And no, that's not a spoiler alert. The movie's been out for 25 years. Get the fuck over it. So when you watch that initial first 5 to 10 minutes, you're probably going to gloss over some stuff, even if you do a good job of taking notes of the most important stuff and you're diligent with that process. But the most important part about this is that when you fail, you actually get new data to start to contextualize the information when you go back and rewatch those first 5 to 10 minutes. And because now you have experience attached to the implementation of your study material, it's going to sink in a little bit deeper, because you'll be able to remember what happened in the round, and that's going to give you a better chance of retaining the information and then using it in the next session, which is exactly what we're going to do in step 4. After you've rewatched the first 5 to 10 minutes, you've gone over the notes and you've filled in the gaps, is reapply. Except this time you're going to be armed with a little bit more information of the gaps that you could be filling. So say, for instance, when I coach my students in phase 1, week 1, we usually go over knee elbow escapes and kipping escapes. And because knee elbow escapes are quite natural to most people, most gyms around the world teach them quite proficiently, they have a lot of success with this one. And because kipping is relatively new and not a lot of coaches around the world teach it, I mean, it should be taught in most gyms, but I don't really see that reflected, especially with the feedback from my students. They have a difficulty in applying this movement. So when we go through this process, they watch the 5-minute video, they take notes of the most important things, and typically what will happen is, because they've never done it before, they'll think that the cross hip frame is the most important thing, and then maybe they'll pick up on the fact of getting all their body weight on one knee is the second most important thing, which to a point is true to a degree, but what they usually fail at the most when they get to this section and the new data that they need is not having a gap between the initial bridge and the kip. Most people, when they try kipping escapes, is they'll get their hands on the hips, they'll bridge, then they'll wait for the hips to come back down, and then they'll kip. But the space for the success of the kipping escape is already gone, because the hips have risen down the femurs, and now you're going to be effectively just flapping about doing nothing. So that's where we go into this, where we re-watch that first 5 to 10 minutes. They usually ask me questions when they go over their notes and they fill in the gaps. Filling the gaps could also be asking your coach or higher belt, and then taking that back into that next session to reapply. And then step number 5, which is the key to tying all of this together, rinse, repeat. And so you're going to go to the next 5 to 10 minutes of your chosen instructional. You're going to take notes of the most important part. You're going to take that information to class in as short a time possible between the study and the session. You're likely going to fuck it up. Then you're going to get new data from fucking it up, where you revise the information of that first of 5 to 10 minutes. You're going to watch it all the way through. You're going to go over the initial notes that you had. You're going to fill in the gaps. You're going to ask for help if you need it from your coach or from a higher belt or somebody that's available to help you. And then you're going to take that information, you're going to reapply it again, and then you're going to do this until you get success with the movements, or you feel like you're getting the idea of what the movement actually is. I'm not going to go into what KPIs you need to hit to successfully move on to the next move. That's something you guys are going to have to decide for yourself. Maybe I'll explain that in another video of when you master a move. If you want to know how to master a move, drop a comment below and I'll film that video for you. But then once you've successfully hit your moves and you've changed this to 2 ticks, then you're going to go to the next 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're going to rinse and repeat until you've watched the entire instructional all the way through in these little segments of 5 to 10 minutes. You've applied it, all the way up, and then you've gained progress in each of the applications of all of the moves that you've been learning or all of the ideas that you've been learning. And now you can say that you've actually studied successfully, you've stopped wasting hours of your time, and you've stopped being this guy that watches Danaher instructionals that just falls asleep and gets nothing out of them, wasting time and money. And now you can start to actualize this, where you actually start to win tournaments, train better, understand the sport deeper, and enjoy your problem solving in your training. So now you know the most effective way to study the sport of jiu-jitsu. If you want to know exactly what you should be studying in order so that you get the best results and stop wasting your time, click this video here so you can steal my system that covers everything you'll need to know in the foundations and the basics so that you can start dominating your training sessions and therefore get bragging rights over your training partners.